In this program, I'm going to be walking you through how to create a UDP socket, a UDP client server program, and we're going to start with the server application. So in the diagram, in this particular diagram, you can see how the communication flow works in UDP client server program. So in the UDP server, we can see the first of all a socket is being created. Then the socket is binded to a client, to an IP address and port number, and then we make use of receive from function to receive a message from the client, and then we can send a message to the client, and then we finally close the socket. And in the UDP client part, you can see also a socket is being created. Then we make use of send to function to send a message to the server, which is received using the receive from function. And then we receive from using receive from function, and then we can receive data from the server. That is when the server uses send to also send message, and then we finally close the UDP client socket. So that is what we try to be achieving in this particular program. So I've already created this particular file. I have named it UDP server.c, a simple UDP server in C, and then I've imported the header file. So now we are going to start coding this particular server from the scratch. So as usual, I'm going to declare function main. So int main, and then we have our this particular argument parameters, int argc, and then argv. So here we are, and then we end int main. We close this, we copy this and paste it here. All right, so this is what we have, our function main. All right, so now we sorry, I forgot something here, char, and then this is a pointer. So here we are. So now, as usual, we check to make sure that the user enters the right arguments over the command line. So I'm going to check if argc not equals to this is the server, so we expect the user to pass two arguments, the name of the file as well as the port number that the server is going to run on. So and if it is not equals to that, then we want to print out an error message to guide the user on how to use the application correctly. So as usual, as we did in the TCP client server program, so we just say usage, print this usage, and then the name of the file, and then followed by port number. You say it port number, right? So here we have the first argument. The first argument is going to be the name of the file, and then we exit. So we exit the program so that the user can run the program again, in the right way. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to paste it here. So this is it. We're making a check for this particular. This is just a if control structure to make sure that the user implementing a functionality to make sure that the user uses this program in the right way. So as we see in the program, in that particular diagram, we have seen previously, the first thing we have to do is to create a socket. So I'm going to make a comment here, socket creation. So we're going to create a socket creation. So we create a socket as usual. I'm going to declare integer. I'm going to call it server socket, socket file descriptor, and then I'm going to invoke function socket, and then I'm going to pass family, that is the domain, AF inet, and then the type is going to be sock diagram, and then 0. So this way we have created our socket, our UDP socket. If you can remember in the TCP program that we did, here we specify it as sock string. So in UDP we specify it as diagram, sock diagram, that is our datagram. and the other one is stream, TCP IP stream, TCP stream, that is in TCP transmission control protocol, while this one is a datagram. All right, so next we may perform a check to make sure that the socket has been created. So I'm going to say if server socket fd is -1, then we print out we can make use of this function Pharaoh, which is a functionality for a function for printing out errors. So we are going to print this message using this particular function, socket creation failed. So it's just a socket creation failed. Okay, and then we exit. Since if the socket is not created, the whole program has failed. So, and then I'm going to copy this as usual. I'm going to paste it at the end of this particular brace. So here we are. We created the socket. We check. We make sure we check that the socket has been created. So after, next is binding. But before we bind, we need to first of all create a structure, instantiate a sock addr in structure. So I'm going to say struct sock addr in. I'm going to call it server address. So I've instantiate a sock addr in, structure. So now I'm going to invoke function memset to clear the structure to make sure it doesn't contain any remnant data, so that we won't have any issue while we attempt to make use of it. So I'm going to say memset. Then I'm going to pass the address of this structure, server address. I'm going to initiate everything to 0. That is to make sure no any data, anything has been, everything in it should be pointing to null, nothing. And then size of, and then another parameter required by this function is the size of the server address. So this particular function memset will clear the server address structure. So now next we fill it in. We populate its members with the right data. So we see server address dot scene family. So the scene family is going to be AF-INET, that is address family. That is IP version 4 address family. So we say AF-INET. Next we see server address dot scene port. What is going to be? It's going to be the port number. We know that the user is going to specify the port number while running this particular program. So it's going to be host network short. It's going to be, but we know that it's going to be passed as a string. So now we are going to convert it into integer. So using this atoy function, and it is the first argument. Sorry, it is not the first argument, it is the second argument that is going to be passed over the terminal. So now next we need to specify the IP address. So this is server address dot scene addr -s underscore addr, and then we are going to specify it as host network long, and then we are going to say in addr any. Okay, so this is what we do. We are finished populating this particular structure. Next we bind. So I'm going to declare another variable. I'm going to call it int bind status. Okay, and then I'm going to invoke function bind now bind our server, our socket to the server address. So I'm going to first the server socket file descriptor, and then server socket file descriptor, first it, and then I'm going to pass this the server address, but I'm going to cast it to this particular struct sock adder, and then address of server address, and then size of server address. Okay, so here we are. So this is binding. Now we want to check to make sure that the binding has properly been binded. So we are going to check if bind status is -1. If it is -1, that means there's an error. It has not been binded. So we said bind failed to bind. So it says failed to bind, and then so we exit also. Okay, so I'm going to copy this as well. I'm going to paste it here. So here we are. We have we go by this diagram. You can see that we have created a socket, we have bind the socket. Now we need to receive a message from the client. So we need a functionality to receive a message from the client. So to do that, we are going to define a buffer, and I'm going to specify the size of that buffer. Let me create a macro. So I'm going to say buffer size. Okay, so I'm going to go up there. I'm going to define a macro. I'm going to hash defined buffer size 1024. So I think it should be okay. Remove this, we don't need it. Okay, so we define a buffer that we are going to receive the message from, and now I'm going to create a variable. I'm going to call it int receive from value, and then I'm going to invoke my function receive from, and then I'm going to pass my server socket fd. So using my server socket fd, I want to receive something from the but before we do that, we need the client address. So before we do that, we need to specify, we need to create a structure to store the client address, just as we did for the server address. So let me just copy this one here, struct here, copy it. So I'm going to paste it here, and I'm going to call it I'm going to call it client address. So next, we need the size of client address. So using this particular type, subclient T, I'm going to say client address size, a new variable. So I've initialized a new variable, and I define a new variable. Okay, I've defined a new variable. Now I want to initialize it with size of client address. So we need this. So now we can receive from the client. So I'm going to struct sock adder in sock adder, and then point to address of client address, and then client address size, and also client address size. client address size. So client address size. So address of client address size. So this is the way we pass it. Receive from. Okay. What are we receiving from? We are socket FZ. We are receiving. What are we receiving? So we need to specify what we are receiving. We are receiving buffer. We need to pass these variables buffer, and then size of buffer size 0. So we need to pass all these parameters, all these arguments to this particular receive from function. So we are using our server socket FD. We want to receive a message. We want to receive a message that is going to be stored in this particular buffer, the size of the buffer, and then we need to pass this 0, and then using from client address and then client address size. So this is the argument we need to pass to the receive from function. So we have received the function. Now let's check if we have genuinely received the function. Anything from the, what if there is an error? We couldn't receive anything. So we check if receive from value is -1, then we can say error is receiving. So error is receiving. So we can just say error in receiving. Error in receiving. Error in receiving. I will exit. Okay, so and then as usual, I'm going to copy this, and then I'm going to paste it here. So next, we need to we have received from. Okay, so now let's print what we have received from the client. So say message from client, message from client, message from client, and percentage s, message from client, and then we message buffer. All right, so next we have gotten our message from client. Now we need to send a message to the client also. We can send any message to him. We can also send a message to him, just as we can see in this particular diagram. After receiving, we also send something to him. Send to. Okay, so now we want to send something to the client as well. So to do so, let's clear the buffer. So make sure that the buffer doesn't contain anything. Message memset, I'm going to pass the buffer 0, and then size of buffer size. So just buffer size, and that's all. So make sure memset will clear the buffer so that we can now make sure that the buffer is free of any data, so that we can send our own message to the client. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to make use of this function str copy, string copy. I'm going to copy something to this particular buffer, and that message is going to be hi client, hello client. Okay, so we have copied a message to this particular buffer. So now we want to send it, so we can send to using send to function. So I'm going to say send to send status. I need to define it also. Int send status, and then using send to function. Okay, here we'll make it up receive from, send to, just as we have in this particular diagram. So you see, we are going to make it up send to. So make it up send to. So send to. Okay. So and what are we sending? This is what we are sending. So I'll just copy this. Copy this. Just some little modification, but they're equally the same. So all like here, we just need to pass size of client address. So that's all. So and then we can also print. Okay, so no need of printing the message. So make sure that we can just make sure something has been sent. If there's any error, we want the program to notify with this error. So I'm going to resend to status. If send to send status, send status equals to -1, error in sending. So we need to print out this message, error in sending, and then we exit. So finally we close the we didn't accept, like in TCP server program where we need to close both the client and the server. Here we just close our server socket FD. So since we didn't accept any client socket, so we are only closing our server socket. So this is our UDP server program. So now what we are going to do, I'm going to compile it, and then if there's any error, we come over and fix the error. Okay, so I'm going to get out of this clear cd cd dash cd YouTube. Okay, still not here. Cd dash cd YouTube. Okay, so and then let me close this one. So next I'm going to ls. So we can see our hello our UDP server.c. So I'm going to compile it. I'm going to say gcc UDP server, and then I want to output it as UDP server. Wow, there's error. So we need to come and fix our error here. So implicit function print. Okay, line 65. Line 65. So let me go to line 65. Let's take it. Correct that error. Line 65. Line number 65. 65, 65, 65, 65, 65, 65. So it's supposed to be print format. So next, which other error again? You can see implicit function close, DMAP close. So I need to import another header file. Let me make sure that particular header file is contained. Control home. So we need to hide this particular function header file. So hash include ini_std.h, ini_std.h. Need this header file. That is where the close function is residing in. So let me clear and then compile it. So no any error. Let's run it. UDP server and then for 9090. So we can see our UDP server is up and running. Now in the next program, in the next tutorial, we are going to create the UDP client, and then we are going to make this two programs, UDP client server program, communicate with one another. So thank you very much for taking your time to watch this video tutorial. Until we meet in the next UDP client program tutorial. Thank you.